Today we're making apple pie, and actually I picked these apples, or I got them from a pumpkin patch about a week ago. So I didn't directly pick them, but they had them freshly picked already in bags. I'm using a mix of apples for my pie, and as you probably know from the title of the video, this isn't a traditional apple pie, it's a skillet apple pie. I think skillet apple pies have more flavor, and you'll see why when I start making it. But I'm using a mix of apples. So I'm of course using Granny Smith apples, some Honey Crisp, and then I'm using a few Golden Delicious. This is really going to give the apple pie a lot of depth. There's going to be a lot of flavor and texture in there that just comes from having the different type of apples. I'm gonna go ahead and peel the apples and cut them, and then I'll come back and show you what I do after they're peeled and cut and how I prepare them to go into the pie. When you're preparing the apples for the pie, there's different ways that you can cut them. You can slice them, you can chop them, you can have chunkier pieces of apple. That's really based on preference. I'm using roughly about 2 pounds of apples. The amount of apples that you use is going to vary on how big your skillet is and of course how many people you're feeding. Okay, so that's 1 apple down. I have a whole bunch of other apples that I need to peel, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back for the seasoning. I'm back. I'm done cutting my apples. This is 8 apples, so I would say I feel like this is about 2 pounds. It looks like the amount of apples that I need just based on experience. So if you're in doubt, go with about 8 apples. Okay, so now I'm ready to season my apples. I have sugar and cinnamon. This is a very easy recipe, but I get lots of flavor just by the way the apple pie is made, because it's a skillet apple pie, not a traditional apple pie. So I have my oven on, it's warming up, it's going up to 350. And while the oven warms, I'm gonna pour in the sugar. And it's 3/4 cups of sugar. So we have 3/4 cups of sugar with the apples. Now we're gonna use 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. So I'm just mixing my apples. You can do this by hand. I'm choosing not to, although I'm getting sugar all over my stove. And just mix them to make sure that the sugar is pretty much coating all of the apples. So mine look pretty well coated. I'm gonna set them to the side. They're gonna start releasing a lot of their juices, and then I'm gonna mix them and toss them again. So now for the skillet part, right? So the apple pie is going in here in the skillet. We're adding everything directly to this skillet. But before we do so, we actually want to create a layer of sweetness, a layer of sugar and butter that's going beneath or below the crust. And for that, we're gonna use 1 stick of butter and 1 cup of light brown sugar. While I'm doing that, I did pull the crust from the fridge because it needs to thaw a little bit. So I'm turning my stovetop on. It's about medium high. And while that heats up, I'm just gonna toss in the whole stick of butter. Okay, so we have a stick of butter there that's almost fully melted. There's a little piece here that's still melting. But while that finishes melting, and it'll melt pretty quickly now that the skillet seems to be warmed up, we're gonna go ahead and add 1 cup of light brown sugar. What we want is for the sugar to melt. Once the sugar is melted and mixed in with the butter, we're done. So here's 1 cup light brown sugar. Toss it in there with the butter. Our oven is ready, so we are almost ready to go here. So what we want to do, again, I don't know if this is coming across on the video, but this is smoking, it's hot, and the smokiness is coming from the cast iron skillet. But what we're doing is mixing the butter with the sugar. It looks like this, a brown goopy mixture. And just make sure that mixes well and the sugar starts melting. This is ready, so I'm turning my stovetop off. I'm moving it away from the heat. And now for the next steps, we have to move pretty quickly and hopefully you'll see why. So now we want to put or place one of the crusts on top of this layer of butter and sugar. And of course, if you've ever dealt with crusts, they are very delicate, right? So we want to move pretty fast because if you know the way crusts are made, there's butter in them and they're going to start melting. So we want to make sure that we place the bottom crust and we have the apples on top, which I'm mixing here just to make sure that all the juices and the sugar and the cinnamon are well integrated in there and having fun. It smells really good. Now I'm going to carefully roll out my bottom crust. I'm not using homemade crust just because of the way this pie is made. If it were a traditional pie where I really want that flakiness in the bottom crust, I don't want it to be soggy, I'd probably be using a homemade crust. But with this one, I just don't care. So it doesn't matter if you buy store-bought in this case, and there's a lot of flavor in here, so it really doesn't matter. Just make sure that you cover the entire bottom. Again, be very careful. This is a skillet. It's very hot. Try to make sure you cover all of the edges of the skillet, and again, be very, very careful. This is very hot. You don't want to melt your crust or accidentally poke a hole in it. Let me see if I can carry it. Yeah, I can just sort of show you what it looks like. See, it's covering everything. I don't want to move it a lot because there is melted butter and sugar at the bottom, and I don't want it to overflow and spill in. But now what we're going to do is just toss all of our apples in there. A lot of the apple goodness. Make sure you keep the bottom crust close to the wall of the skillet. Now our final step is to take the top crust and just place it over the apples. And this is really easy to do, but again, you want to be delicate, or not delicate, just be careful with the crust because it is delicate. I'm just gonna place it over, and what we're gonna do is tuck in the crust. So what I'm going to do now is brush over it with a little bit of egg, just so it browns in the oven. I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of white sugar over it, and then I'm gonna cut some slits. And this is where you can get creative and sort of make a pattern or a design of some sorts if you want on the top of your pie. This is done. It's ready to go in the oven. It's gonna go in the oven at 350 for about an hour. Keep an eye on it. You'll see it bubbling. You'll see one of the crust gets that golden color. It's about done. So I'm going to put that in the oven, and then I'll be back in an hour just to show you what it looks like. So there's our pie. It's baking, but we can see the bubbling on the sides of the butter and sugar and just the juices from the pie in general. So I'm gonna add a tray underneath. I'm very against opening the oven while the food is cooking, but I don't want to mess in my oven. So there we go, 30 minutes to go. We're back. The pie is ready. The oven just went off. It was there for exactly 1 hour. So let's go ahead, take it out, and see what it looks like. I'm really excited. It smells really good in the apartment. Our pie is ready. It was in the oven for 1 hour, and it is done. It smells amazing. It looks great. All we have to do now is let it cool for a little bit before we cut into it. This is the Skillet Apple Pie. It looks amazing. It smells incredible. If you make the apple pie, please let me know in the comments. If you add something to the recipe, let me know. I don't add any nutmeg. I don't use any lemon, but I know a lot of other apple pie recipes use that, although they're not skillet apple pies. So if for some reason you do that, just let me know what it tastes like. And let me know if you like this version of an apple pie in a skillet better than the traditional apple pie in a dish. That's all for today. Enjoy, like, follow, share if you enjoyed the recipe. Bye.